Well, once again, hello everybody. In this thumbnail for week 4, I want to scaffold some of the information that you'll be encountering in your current reading from the textbook. This chapter is, of course, like all of them really, but it's especially important in sociology because it deals with the subject of groups. In fact, sociology is sometimes called the social science, which is the study of groups and group behavior. So it's very important for us to get an idea of what a group actually is and the different kinds of groups that exist. And these, of course, will be discussed in much greater detail throughout the chapter, but I want to highlight some of them for you here. Much as you would already have surmised, certainly group implies a numeric kind of an idea, and for our purposes, anything having to do with 2 or more members would be, for our purposes, considered a group. This could be everything from something very, very small with 2 members, which technically would be called a dyad, and then moving up in size to something of group size 3, which is called a triad, all the way up into groups having literally millions of members, such as whole societies themselves. It's important that we distinguish intellectually the idea of a group from an aggregate and a category. An aggregate is simply a collection. It doesn't have the formal properties of groups that concern us in sociology. A category is something that you will encounter again and again, and that is an assemblage of people who share some important defining characteristic. Let me get going here with perhaps the most fundamental distinction of groups, and that's the notion of a primary group from a secondary group. Now, a primary group is one which I often characterize as a situation within which people know each other in the totality of their personalities. This means to say that they're going to necessarily be small, and people will know each other very, very, very well. Literally, people will know each other's family backgrounds. They will know what kinds of things turn a person on and turn a person off. They will know what a person's aspirations are. Those kinds of things. Very, very, very intimate familiarity with people who are members of a primary group. And as I say, those by definition will be very, very small in size and very few in number. In fact, sociologists really only recognize several circumstances that truly would qualify as primary groups. One of them is what we'll later discuss in more detail, which is the family group. A second one is something called a children's play group, which is not discussed in this chapter and which I won't take time to go into here. And a third is something that is called true community. Now, not community in the geographical sense, meaning like a neighborhood, the way we use that word in everyday language, but really meaning a relatively small group of people who have lived around each other for generations and generations and generations, such that they're pretty closely connected with each other, and people once again know each other in the totality of their experience and in terms of their personalities. Another kind of a group that you'll encounter that's very important for us is called a reference group. And a reference group may be real or imaginary. It doesn't have to have actual living, breathing people in it. The important thing about a reference group is it is a cluster of people, if you will, who embody a set of characteristics that we use for purposes of comparing ourselves and use it for motivational purposes to help direct us towards whatever objectives we might be seeking to accomplish. So, for example, for me, I have always found the astronaut corps to be a very important bunch of folks because, in my own personal judgment, they embody characteristics that I very much admire and that I would very much try to emulate to the greatest extent that I can. But as I say, a reference group might also be purely fictional. There's nothing saying, for example, that you could not have as a reference group the Three Musketeers, that famous novel by Alexandre Dumas, who talked about the three Frenchmen and D'Artagnan and the various characteristics and qualities which defined them as a group. Importantly, a reference group has motivational import for us. I've already mentioned a dyad and a triad. A dyad, of course, is very important. It's 2 members. It'd be something like a husband and wife, or perhaps a brother and a sister, or 2 brothers. We also could use the notions of groups, by the way, to actually embody groups of groups. There's nothing wrong with saying that you have a group of companies, for example, who comprise an industrial group. But triads are especially important for us because they are three-member groups. And the reason they're especially important sociologically, because it's in that group that we first see the possibility of coalition formation. For example, if you have a group of three members whom I will arbitrarily call A, B, and C, coalition simply means that two of them can join forces against the third. So in a triad, we could have A and B against C, we could have B and C against A, or we could have C and A against B. So the triad could be broken down into a dyad and a solitary member where all kinds of things can happen having to do with the exercise of power and influence. You'll get into a discussion a little bit after that having to do with leadership in groups, and I want to especially mention for you here two things that have to occur within groups for them to be successful. It seems that people within group settings have, first of all, the need to accomplish an instrumental goal. That is, a group exists for a purpose. It's an instrumental entity, if you will, through which people accomplish ends. And there's a leadership role or an achieved social status within the group involving a leader who exercises the instrumental goal. That is, leading the group towards the accomplishment of whatever it is that that group exists to accomplish. But interestingly, groups also have a distinctly social character to them, which simply has to do with people interacting among themselves. This is a social type of an experience, if you will, and groups have what are called expressive needs. You must be able to meet the needs of the individuals who comprise the group in an interpersonal kind of a way, and there can be a different leadership role associated with accomplishing that. So groups can really have two kinds of leaders at the same time. One person might be an instrumental leader while another is the expressive leader. Of course, it would be best if you could have embodied in one person both the instrumental leadership function and the expressive leadership function. Your chapter will begin to wrap up with a discussion of formal organizations, which are terribly, terribly important in our society. And you'll go into a lot of discussion about a form of formal organization which is called bureaucracies. And there will be a number of formal characteristics that define what a bureaucracy is for us, the identification of which we owe to our old friend Max Weber, the German sociologist. So those of you who are going to be business majors, for example, will encounter implicitly Weber when you get into your courses on, for example, marketing. And once again, bureaucracies will be very, very important. So it's important for us to understand what bureaucracies are, why they're important, what their strengths are, and also what their weaknesses are. So I encourage you to give some thought to those topics, and as you do so, you will wrap up our assignment for this week. So with that, I'm going to sign off for now. Wish you good luck with your work for this week, and I will see you next time around. Until then, take care.